Hypnotize minds. 3-6 Mafia. And your boy DJ Tame. And it's another going down.
Is everyone hypnotized? It is no exaggeration to say that every human being is hypnotized to some extent, either by ideas he has uncritically accepted from others, or ideas he has repeated to himself or convinced himself are true. These negative ideas have exactly the same effect upon our behavior as the negative ideas implanted into the mind of a hypnotized subject by a professional hypnotist. Have you ever seen a demonstration of honest-to-goodness hypnosis? If not, let me describe to you just a few of the more simple phenomena which result from the hypnotist's suggestion. The hypnotist tells a football player that his hand is stuck to the table and that he cannot lift it. It is not a question of the football player not trying. He simply cannot. He strains and struggles until the muscles of his arm and shoulder stand out like cords. But his hand remains fully rooted to the table. He tells a champion weightlifter that he cannot lift a pencil from the desk, and although normally he can hoist a 400-pound weight overhead, he now actually cannot lift the pencil. Strangely enough, in the above instances, hypnosis does not weaken the athletes. They are potentially as strong as ever, but without realizing it consciously, they are working against themselves. On the one hand, they try to lift their hand or the pencil by voluntary effort and actually contract the proper lifting muscles. But on the other hand, the idea you cannot do it causes contrary muscles to contract quite apart from their will. The negative idea causes them to defeat themselves. They cannot express or bring into play their actual available strength. The gripping strength of a third athlete has been tested on a dynamometer that has been found to be 100 pounds. All his effort and straining cannot budge the needle beyond the 100-pound mark. Now he is hypnotized and told, "You are very, very strong. Stronger than you have ever been in your life. Much, much stronger. You are surprised at how strong you are." Again, the gripping strength of his hand is tested. This time, he easily pulls the needle to the 125-pound mark. Again, strangely enough, hypnosis has not added anything to his actual strength. What the hypnotic suggestion did do was to overcome a negative idea which had previously prevented him from expressing his full strength. In other words, the athlete in his normal waking state had imposed a limitation upon his strength by the negative belief that he could only grip 100 pounds. The hypnotist merely removed this mental block and allowed him to express his true strength. The hypnosis literally dehypnotized him temporarily from his own self-limiting beliefs about himself. As Dr. Barber has said, it is awfully easy to assume that the hypnotist himself must have some magical power when you see rather miraculous things happen during a hypnotic session. The stutterer talks fluently. The timid, shy, retiring Casper Melquestos becomes outgoing, poised, and makes a stirring speech. Another individual who is not especially good at adding figures with a pencil and paper when awake multiplies 2-3-digit figures in his head. All this happens apparently merely because the hypnotist tells them that they can and instructs them to go ahead and do it. To onlookers, the hypnotist's word has a magical power. Such, however, is not the case. The power, the basic ability to do these things was inherent in the subjects all the time, even before they met the hypnotist. The subjects, however, were unable to use this power because they themselves did not know it was there. They had bottled it up and choked it off because of their own negative beliefs. Without realizing it, they had hypnotized themselves into believing they could not do these things, and it would be truer to say that the hypnotist had dehypnotized them than to say he had hypnotized them. within you, whoever you may be, regardless of how big a failure you may think yourself to be, is the ability and the power to do whatever you need to do to be happy and successful. Within you right now is the power to do things you never dreamed possible. This power becomes available to you just as soon as you can change your beliefs, just as quickly as you can dehypnotize yourself from the ideas of I can't, I'm not worthy, I don't deserve it, and other self-limiting beliefs. Dehypnotize yourself from false beliefs. My friend Dr. Alfred Adler had an experience when a young boy which illustrates just how powerful belief can be upon behavior and ability. He got off to a bad start in arithmetic, and his teacher became convinced that he was dumb in mathematics. The teacher then advised the parents of this fact and told them not to expect too much of him. They too were convinced. Adler passively accepted the evaluation they had placed upon him, and his grades in arithmetic proved they had been correct. One day, however, he had a sudden flash of insight and thought he saw how to work a problem the teacher had put on the board in which none of the other pupils could work. He announced as much to the teacher. He and the whole class laughed. She and the whole class laughed. Whereupon he became indignant, strode to the blackboard, and worked the problem, much to their amazement. In doing so, he realized that he could understand arithmetic. He felt a new confidence in his ability and went on to become a good math student. Now, the point I want to make is this. Adler had been hypnotized by a false belief about himself, not figuratively, but literally, and actually hypnotized. Remember that we said in the last chapter that the power of hypnosis is the power of belief. Let me repeat here Dr. Barber's explanation of the power of hypnosis. We found that hypnotic subjects are able to do surprising things only when convinced that the hypnotist's words are true statements. When the hypnotist has guided the subject to the point where he is convinced that the hypnotist's words are true statements, the subject then behaves differently because he thinks and believes differently. The important thing for you to remember is that it does not matter in the least how you got the idea or where it came from. You may never have met a professional hypnotist. You may have never been formally hypnotized. But if you have accepted an idea from yourself, your teachers, your parents, friends, advertisements, or from any other source, and further, if you are firmly convinced that that idea is true, it has the same power over you as the hypnotist's words have over the hypnotized subject. Scientific research has shown that Dr. Adler's experience was not 1 in a million, but typical of practically all students who make poor grades. In Chapter 1, we told you of how Prescott Leckie had brought about almost miraculous improvement in the grades of school children by showing them how to change their self-image. After thousands of experiments and many years of research, Leckie concluded that poor grades in school are in almost every case due in some degree of the student's self-conception and self-definition. These students had been literally hypnotized by such ideas as I am dumb, I have a weak personality, I am poor in arithmetic, I am a naturally poor speller, I am ugly, I do not have a mechanical type mind, etc. With such self-definitions, the student had to make poor grades in order to be true to himself. Unconsciously, making poor grades became a moral issue with him. It would be as wrong from his own viewpoint for him to make good grades as it would be to steal if he defines himself as an honest person. It all depends upon what and whose norms we measure ourselves by. It is not knowledge of actual inferiority in skill or knowledge which gives us an inferiority complex and interferes with our living. It is the feeling of inferiority that does this. And this feeling of inferiority comes about for just one reason. We judge ourselves and measure ourselves not against our own norm or par, but against some other individual's norm. When we do this, we always, without exception, come out second best. But because we think and believe and assume that we should measure up to some other person's norm, we feel miserable and second rate and conclude that there is something wrong with us. The next logical conclusion in this cockeyed reasoning process is to conclude that we are not worthy, that we do not deserve success and happiness, and that it would be out of place for us to fully express our own abilities and talents, whatever they might be, without apology or without feeling guilty about it. All this comes about because we have allowed ourselves to be hypnotized by the entirely erroneous idea that I should be like so and so, or I should be like everybody else. The fallacy of this second idea can be readily seen through if analyzed, for in truth there are no fixed standard common to everybody else. Everybody else is composed of individuals, no two of whom are alike. The person with an inferiority complex invariably compounds the error by striving for superiority. His feelings spring from the false premise that he is inferior. From this false premise, a whole structure of logical thought and feeling is built. If he feels bad because he is inferior, the cure is to make himself as good as everybody else, and the way to feel really good is to make himself superior. This striving for superiority gets him into more trouble, causes more frustration, and sometimes bring about a neurosis where none existed before. He becomes more miserable than ever, and the harder he tries, the more miserable he becomes. Inferiority and superiority are reverse sides of the same coin. The cure lies in realizing that the coin itself is spurious. The truth about you is this: you are not inferior. You are not superior. You are simply you. Dr. Norton L. Williams, psychiatrist addressing a medical convention, said recently that modern man's anxiety and insecurity stemmed from a lack of self-realization, and that inner security can only be found in finding in oneself an individuality, uniqueness, and distinctiveness that is akin to the idea of being created in the image of God. He also said that self-realization is gained by a simple belief in one's own uniqueness as a human being, a sense of deep and wide awareness of all people and all things, and a feeling of constructive influencing of others through one's own personality. How to use relaxation to dehypnotize yourself. Physical relaxation plays a key role in the dehypnotization process. Our currently held beliefs, whether good or bad, true or false, were formed without effort, with no sense of strain, and without the exercise of willpower. Our habits, whether good or bad, were formed in the same way. It follows that we must employ the same process in forming new beliefs, or new habits, that is, in a relaxed condition. It has been amply demonstrated that attempting to use effort or willpower to change beliefs or to cure bad habits has an adverse rather than a beneficial effect. Emile Curie, the little French pharmacist who astonished the world around 1920 with the results he obtained with the power of suggestion, insisted that effort was the one big reason most people fail to utilize their inner powers. Your suggestions, ideal goals, must be made without effort if they are to be effective, he said. Another famous QE saying was in his Law of Reversed Effort: when the will and the imagination are in conflict, the imagination invariably wins the day. The very heart of his system was his finding that effort was the one big deterrent to either breaking a bad habit or learning a new one. Making an effort to refrain from the habit actually reinforced the habit he found. His experiments prove that the best way to break a habit is to form a clear mental image of the desired end result and to practice without effort toward reaching that goal. If a response habit is to be learned, or if a response pattern is to be made habitual, he said, it is essential that the learner shall have an idea of the response that is to be achieved or shall have an idea of the change in the environment that the response will produce. The important factor in learning, in short, is the thought of an objective to be attained, either as a specific behavior pattern or as the result of the behavior, together with a desire for the attainment of the object.
I know what you're trying to do.
I'm trying to free your mind, Neil, but I can only show you the door. You're the one that has to walk through it.